Guys, this is Kristine. I am here with Miss Mia and Miss Tatum, and today we're talking about conflict in the U.S. workforce. So we're just going to go through a handful of slides. We're going to talk about what conflict is, what types of conflict there are, why it comes up, and what we can do about it. So I can move on to kind of that second slide. The basic definition. What is organizational conflict? Anytime you've got a rift or a disagreement, and it can be caused by a multitude of things. There's no completely definitive list, but they do kind of fall into four different groups. And we can categorize them in a few of the groups on the right-hand side. First, we have relationship conflict. That's usually pretty personal. We've got task conflict, which is where we talk about the what, we cannot agree on what we're all supposed to be doing. We have technical conflict where there is discord about how we're going to achieve our goal. And then we have a status conflict, which is kind of the who's in charge here and who gets to make the decision, who has the final say so. I can start off with our first one, which is relationship conflict. It's going to be your most common conflict in most workplaces, whether it's corporate, whether it's fast casual, whether you're in a doctor's office, whether you're working from home. A lot of relationship conflict is easy to come by because it is personal and it does evoke emotion. It's between two or more people. It doesn't just have to be two, it can be a group. It's something that evokes an emotional response, and it can really come from anything. We all have different personalities. We're raised different. We approach work differently. We are just all super different. So personalities clash in the workplace. And normally you'll have a personal conflict that comes from you don't like the way someone said something to you, or they may have a problem with the way you said something to them, or how they act towards you, their behavior, or maybe it's that they don't have any reaction to you at all and you feel like they're cold. There's a lot of different ways to have relationship conflict. We're taking a look at some of Amy Gallo's work. She is a editor for the Harvard Business Review, and she is an author of a book called How to Deal with Conflict. And she talks about the fact that we don't often address relationship conflict because it causes a lot of anxiety. First of all, most people kind of run from conflict. They're not conflict seekers, and it brings up uncomfortable feelings to talk about things, especially when they're emotional things. We tend to get worked up. So it causes anxiety to address them, and it causes anxiety to get through them. So most people don't want to speak up. But what we can't do is avoid those things, because personal issues, unlike maybe technical issues, can kind of fester. They can kind of get worse. I would think of it like maybe you have kind of a toothache now, but you don't go to the dentist, and in a few months, it's much worse. You have to deal with it, and now it's painful. We have to speak up. We can't avoid those things. They do have to be addressed, even if they're uncomfortable. Maybe the person you're dealing with is a totally different personality than you. You have to kind of find common ground, find something in common, find the reason there is something causing this uncomfortable thing between the two of you. Something that struck me that Amy Gallo said is remove the personal from personality. Just because someone has a bigger personality and maybe more direct than you are does not mean they're rude or they're going after you. On the contrary, if you have somebody that's generally quiet and doesn't address a lot of people, it doesn't mean they don't value your opinion or they're being rude. There's just different levels of personality and how we react to each other. You may be having a conflict that really is nothing. It's just we're not used to people talking to us that loudly or that quietly, or how they say things. The last two, in ways to get around this conflict kind of go hand in hand. Agree to disagree, and there is no winner. So with personal conflict, there is no, well, she was right and he was wrong, or, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Maybe you get to that point, but you're never going to fully agree on everything. So I always think if you have a conflict with someone, maybe you're not their best friend at the end of the day, but you get past the conflict, you find a mutual respect. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We solve the issue, we move forward, we work our best, and we work our most efficiently. So basically, we'll talk about this further in different types of conflict, but communication is the key. There really isn't any negative communication when we're working through that. So I'll move on, and you guys can take over.
Some good key points, Kristine. I'm going to touch on those here at the end, but go ahead, Tatum.
Thank you. So like Kristine said, I'm going to go over task conflict. So what is task conflict? According to a Harvard Law article, task conflict, it often involves issues related to employees' assignments, and that can include disputes on how to divide up resources or tasks, different opinions on how to do those tasks and procedures and policies, and then just managing expectations at work overall. And this happens very often in work environments, and I think it definitely happens when one person depends, like one coworker depends on having their task, somebody else's task done, if that makes sense. So for example, say me and Kristine, we're coworkers, and so just like the beginning of this lecture, she opened up with all of the intro and everything we were going to go over. She had to get her part done so I could come in and get my part done. So that often happens in task conflicts in this type of situations. And I can say that at a current office I work at, me and a coworker of mine, she just started working and we didn't get off on the right foot. She came from a medical office still, but just a different type of office that was ran. And we have very specific doctors that we prepare for. We prepare our charts for all of the stuff we get ready in the mornings and the afternoons, suture removers to Botox and fillers. It's all on you. And so she kind of needed help to do those tasks. And while we all have other tasks to do for our providers, she constantly needed help with hers. And we couldn't get our job done because she couldn't get her job done. And so it kind of just interrupted office flow, and nobody could get into their appointments on time. Nobody's being checked in on time. Nobody can, leave in a good hour. Current, office time, it's about 15 minutes for an appointment, and we were running 30 to 40. So we really just had to find that solution. We had to find it fast because people were mad, which is understandable. I would be upset as well. So.
And you mean patients? Patients were mad?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Patients were upset because they usually come in, it's a 15-minute visit, and now it's taking 40 minutes. And so it's just not something they're usually used to, and they know that's not how it works. Like, that's not how a regular visit goes.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we have to come up with a solution quickly. And so I was on a lunch break, and I went over and I talked to her, and I was like, hey, you seem a little irritated, what's going on? Like, you seem to, you can't get these tasks done, and, we're all trying to get them done and help you as well. But, it seems hard because you're kind of backlogging our office flow. And she was just, it's a stressful situation for her to be in, It's very fast paced. Our providers want the patients right then and there, because when it's lunchtime, they're going to eat. And when it's time to get out of the office, they're out of the office. They want to go home. And so they're rushing her, and she's new, and doctors can be a little pushy, let's say, in the nicest way possible. And so I was like, okay, like, I understand, I'm here next to you if you ever need help with anything. Like, I can always help you real quick. Like, don't worry about it. You can always ask. And I just talked to her, and we just had to have that communication and solution to be able to work through this and have our office flow normally and correctly. Now, 3 weeks later, we have 15-minute appointments again.
That's great. So you guys had to figure out what you needed to accomplish,
and it boiled down to
communication.
Make us the most
efficient. Yes.
All boiled down, yes, to communication. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing,
Was-
because when we've met before, the three of us, Kristine, you were the one that brought that up. And when you brought it up, I was like, that really is what all of this boils down to. All the research, the different types of conflict, there's a communication piece missing somewhere. So
Yeah.
after you
So we had to
communicated with
figure
her,
out.
she opened up, and now she's open to the process in the office's way, not her way, I guess.
Yes,
You guys figured out what you needed to do, and now you get it done efficiently.
we
That's
did.
great.
All it took was a little talk and a sandwich, and we got it done.
Task conflict resolved. I love it. I love it. All right. So ready to move along, ladies?
Yes,
Sure.
ma'am.
All right. So I'm going to kind of wrap everything up. I'm going to try to bring everything together as much as I possibly can. So I went through and did a lot of my research from the beloved Adam Grant, organizational psychologist. He has a TED ventured podcast called Work Life. And this particular podcast talked about the science of workplace conflict, how to be productive in workplace conflict. And he really just kind of started off saying, okay, we know every relationship and every team and every workplace has conflict. It's not something that you're going to get away from. And extensive research, which in his podcast, he did not cite the research, but he just said extensive research shows that conflict has a big impact on cohesion and performance. And obviously so. If you had this type of situation in your office, which we hope no one ever experiences this, but if your coworker comes up to you and with their words punches you in the face or in the gut or whatever, physically or verbally, like, you're not going to have cohesion. And of course, lack of cohesion can bring up a sense of apathy. Of course, performance is going to be affected when there's that apathy there, because you don't want to work with that person or you don't want to finish that project. Let them figure it out. All of those things happen. So what he goes on to say is, it's not how often you have conflict, but how you manage it. And it's not having less conflict, but it is having the right conflict. And that's what these pictures are demonstrating. The numbers is how often, and then managing conflict and not having less, but having the right kind. And going on to resolution, of course, all of this is going to boil down to having communication. And he says that the first step to untangling a messy conflict and bringing it back to the essence of what it's actually about is to walk down the ladder of inference. So this graphic here that I got from Mr. I think it's S. Al-Hattab from last year, lays out the ladder of inference just the way that Adam Grant talked about in his TED podcast, The Science of Workplace Conflict. And your observations always come in at the bottom, and you just start to walk up that ladder and make assumptions and conclusions about what's happening in whatever conflict that you're involved in. And what ends up happening is that every person—
I think we lost Mia for just a few. There you go.
What happened now? Oh, move this over?
No, we lost you for just a quick second. You're
Oh,
good.
really? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm back. So what he ends up saying is that you walk up and you start to make assumptions. You're at the bottom of the ladder, you make your observations and you come to your assumptions. And then each person in the conflict arrives to their own conclusion. But before that, many conflicts just come from making the wrong assumptions. You go from observations to assumptions, and you're creating this narrative in your head. You're not knowing where this other person is coming from. But now you have all of this going on. You come to a conclusion, and then everybody is coming at their own conclusion and arguing only about the conclusion. So his ultimate reference was instead share your observations. At the bottom of the ladder, share your observations. Talk about your assumptions and walk down that ladder of inference and invite the other person to do the same thing. Relationship conflict, like we spoke about earlier with Kristine kicking us off, describes the personality differences that people tend to go through, and they emote whatever they're going through during that particular conflict. Now, as far as status conflict, in a case study with Mr. Adam Grant and two coworkers of his, but they worked in the same workplace. Their names were Orrin and Daniel. There was a a conflict that went from a relationship conflict to a task conflict and ended up being a status conflict. And what the gentleman ended up finding out was that what they needed to do was to clarify their roles in the very beginning, because the communication was lost along the way. And behaviors and values from someone who's from the UK and their type of humor mixed with someone who's from Mexico working in a UK office, and he doesn't understand that banter, and the communication was just completely lost. So now you have someone who's giving orders to another, and the other one is like, I don't have to listen to you. Like, on the ladder of hierarchy, I'm higher than you are. So now we need to figure out clarity of roles in this particular project, whatever that is. And after you establish that clarity of roles, establish the respect and make it clear that you value the other person. So moving right along to technical conflict is a conflict we haven't touched on much in this presentation, but technical conflict is really the how that you work. How do you get the task done? So the task is the what, and that tends to be more productive conflict, Adam Grant says. But the task is the what. The relationship brings out the personality differences in relationship conflict. The technical is the how. And then, of course, we talked about the status being the hierarchy in that case study that I just shared with you. So as far as another case study for you all, we have a real life case study that we have experienced in our own very group. And that was the technical conflict. How in the world are we going to get together with schedules that are all over the place to get everything done with these schedules that seem to be unmanageable? But we figured out the how. Our technical conflict resided. We realized that we needed to get done what we needed to get done with the three of us that started off as 4, and we figured out a way. Cohesion can happen when you can communicate and bring everything back to the core of, this is what we need to do. Let's just get to our goal. And ladies, I think we've done that beautifully. So thank you for your time in being here with me in this group, getting this together. I think we figured out our technical conflict, and we've done a good presentation that I hope you all enjoy.
Thank you guys so much.
You.
All right. Good night.
Good night.